Keir Starmer must have his head in his hands over his cornflakes this morning, Chris, because we've said multiple times that really he just has to keep everything simple and uncomplicated in the run-up to the next election, and he has a really good shot. Just explain to people what happened yesterday, because it's a bit of a technical political issue, and these 10 frontbenchers who have called for a ceasefire, where's it left Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party?
It comes down to the difference between two words, Bev and Andrew: ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities. Now, Labour put down their own. It's all to do with the conflict in Gaza and whether there should be a ceasefire, stop all fighting, and allow humanitarian aid to get in to alleviate the appalling suffering for people, Palestinians in Gaza. Now, the UK government's policy is the same as America, which is supporting a pause in hostilities to allow aid to get in, but not a ceasefire, because the view is that would cement Hamas's gains after the horrific terrorist attack on October the 7th. So the Labour Party is supporting the government in that idea of a pause, a cessation of hostilities, but not a ceasefire. The left of the party, the pro-Palestinian lobby within the Labour Party, want a ceasefire, and last night the SNP put down a motion in Parliament to an amendment to the King's speech calling for a ceasefire. MPs who voted for that were voting against government policy. As many as 10 Labour frontbenchers voted in favour of a ceasefire, and therefore they have now quit the front bench. Now, how that looks for the Keir Starmer, I think it kind of helps him. It helps support the position he's going to have with the wider public, that he will not be swayed by the left of the party. He will do what's right for the country. He's made clear, as I understand it privately, to the Prime Minister when he's made Prime Minister last year, Mr Sunak, that on issues of national security, on big areas of public or foreign policy, he will back the Prime Minister. I think that we didn't see that with Jeremy Corbyn over the Salisbury poisonings. We're seeing the opposite with Keir Starmer. He's showing the rest of the public, I will take the hard choices despite my party to be strong for this country. And indeed, many of those who quit the front bench are probably left-wingers who wanted to move on anyway and bring his kind of more centrist group to run the Labour Party. So I think, although it looks difficult for him, it won't damage him. And of course, all we're talking about right now is Rwanda. We're not even talking about Labour civil war. So it has. He's a lucky general, Andrew and Bev.
All right, that's Chris Hope, our political editor. Well, let's talk straight away now to Steve McCabe, who's the Labour MP for Selly Oak, who voted with his own side last night. Steve, morning to you. 56 Labour MPs backing that ceasefire. That's a quarter of Keir Starmer's MPs. What I think is quite significant, Steve, when you look at some of those who've resigned from their front bench roles because they supported a ceasefire now, they have very large Muslim populations in their constituency, and they're clearly fearful that they're in danger of losing the Muslim vote, hence their support for the ceasefire. Doesn't it boil down to that, a political calculation?
Well, I think it's true that quite a lot of the people who've resigned, quite a lot of the people who voted are part of the more recent intake, so they probably haven't had a very difficult issue to contend with yet. What happens in a situation like this is that your email inbox is flooded with people. You would think the entire constituency was demanding something at times. Of course, it's usually quite an organised email campaign, and I think it does spook people. So I think there is an element of truth in what you say, Andrew. But it's also true that, some people genuinely want a ceasefire. We all want to see an end to the hostilities. It's just that, you have to be realistic about what that vote meant last night, and it wasn't going to advance the situation one iota.
Interesting, one of the names that leapt out at me, Steve, looking at that list, Naz Shah up in Bradford, she will be painfully aware, of course, that back in 2012, a certain George Galloway stood for respect in a by-election in her Bradford constituency. She wasn't the MP then, and won a stunning victory, and he was standing on a pledge to get British troops out of Afghanistan. Is the spectre of George Galloway and other independent Muslim candidates haunting the Labour Party today?
Well, as you say, Naz had a very tough by-election up in Bradford. I think the difficulty, as I say, is that it's easy to misread the kind of pressure that MPs are being subject to. I mean, if I was to take seriously the things that I'm hearing myself, in my seat, where I actually have a relatively small Muslim population, I would assume that I've got no chance of winning in the next election. I think the difficulty is that the people who purport to speak for the Muslim population in these areas are very loud, they're very organised, but they're not very representative.
Steve, let me ask you a little bit about what's been going on with the Conservative Party this week. What was your reaction to seeing David Cameron being parachuted in as Foreign Secretary?
Well, good for him, but I think it may be an act of desperation on the part of the Prime Minister.
It was what, sorry?
An act of desperation.
An act of desperation.
Do you think also, Steve, it will backfire politically because Brexiteers can't stand him because of Project Fear and all the misinformation during the referendum campaign, and a lot of Remainers can't stand him because he called the referendum in the first place and then cleared off when he didn't win the vote?
Well, you put it very well. He's symbolic of the problems that the Conservative Party have.
Right. So not a big plus then from you, Steve.
Not exactly. Well, it depends how you look at it. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage for Labour.
Let me ask you this. So we were discussing yesterday when the Supreme Court ruling did not go in the favour of the Conservative government. And that looks like that is a huge blow for Rishi Sunak. Would you want the Conservative Party to try and find a new leader now, to have another contest to find a new leader in the run-up to the election, given how unpopular he is? Would you want to see that or not?
Well, I mean, I think that's entirely up to them. I think I did see recently that a group has already met and started to organise writing in the letters to the chair of the 22 committee. So there's obviously some people in the current Conservative Party are looking for a new leader. Look, they're going to run out of candidates soon. How many prime ministers can you have?